After my nearly 6-hour cross examination, I was invited to stay. I was also given the option to attend the trial the rest of the week, but I decided to return home and stay there for good. The stress, sadness, and worry were all unavoidable. I needed to stay present for myself, so I took the rest of the week off from work. The energy I felt was heavy and somber. I decided to make a mala and looked through my materials. I found a beautiful copper and silver pendant that had a woman's arms around a man. I imagined this being a resemblance of me protecting Kevin with my love. "It's all going to be okay," I whispered to the pendant as if speaking to Kevin directly. I pulled together my 8mm Amazonite and black onyx gemstone beads and carefully laid them out in an ombre pattern from darkest to lightest, then light to dark again. I prayed and I hummed as I beaded the mullah. "This is for you, honey. Know that the truth sets you free. The truth sets you free." The next day was the final day in the courtroom where Kevin would face his convictions and sentencing. My lawyer called and invited me to give an impact statement. This impact statement is your final word that you'll be able to present to the jury. They'll take your thoughts into consideration, and there's a possibility that his sentence may be influenced by what you say. An impact statement would sound something like, "I've been impacted by Kevin's actions in a way that has affected my life in such and such manner," my lawyer explained. I appreciated that the military really took my input to heart from beginning to end. No, I really just want this to end without any more input from me. I feel that sharing my truth was enough, and if the jury doesn't believe me, then that's not going to affect me one way or another. I really just wish the best outcome for Kevin. Evidence. One traceable fingerprint was found. After taking mine and Kevin's, his matched. Prosecution argument of findings. Circuit Trial Counsel. Members, drug deals don't happen in front of nuns. To the extent that anyone was expecting, in any case that involves an officer over 2 years who regularly used, possessed, gave out, sold drugs, knew a drug dealer, if anyone expected that the government was going to be able to provide you with Mother Teresa in that sort of case, you are sorely mistaken as to what the nature of drug use and abuse is. Drug use doesn't happen in front of nuns. Every single one of these people that came in front of you has their own issues in their own way. That's just the nature of the beast. But your job as members of this court-martial isn't to pass judgment on the kind of people that they are. You don't have to want to invite them to your house for Christmas, but you do need to determine that when those folks came in and testified to you, whether they were telling you the truth. Before we get into the evidence, and members, you've probably drawn your own conclusions as to what this evidence means already, but I'm going to ask you for your patience. There's a lot to talk about. It's been a busy 2 years for Captain Larson, and as we go through that flyer and as we go through the charges that he's facing, I want you to keep in mind a couple of things. Number one, reasonable doubt. The judge tells you what it means. He says that there are very few things in this world that we know with absolute certainty, and in criminal law cases, the law does not require proof that overcomes every possible doubt. In other words, members, if you are going to require that Captain Larson have confessed to every crime in order to find him guilty, then the justice system will not work. You must only find Captain Larson guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The judge tells you you don't have to check your common sense at the door. You don't need to pretend like you are locked away in an ivory tower, ignorant as to what's really going on here. In fact, we bring in members of the military community so that you can exercise your common sense, so that you can draw on your own experiences, so that you can evaluate the testimony that you heard in front of you, both from Captain Larson's commander and the other witnesses, whether that's true or whether it's a lie. Reason and common sense is reasonable doubt. It's not something on a calculator that you can't get unless you can reach 100. Reason and common sense. Members, We are going to go through all of the charges and specifications in some details, but before that, I just want to talk to you about this instruction from the judge. He instructs you that you have the duty to determine the believability of witnesses. You do. And he gives you some tools in order to do that. He says you should consider the witness's intelligence. You should consider the intelligence of everyone that testifies in front of you. You should consider Captain Larson's intelligence when evaluating whether that statement he made to his commander and to the other captain is the truth. You should evaluate the sincerity of these people in court. And I would ask you to consider members. Let's take Brie Larson as an example. Brie Larson was pretty dang forthcoming about her bumps and bruises, wasn't she? She said, "Yeah, I used drugs with my husband multiple times. Yeah, I met his drug dealer. Yes, I lied for my husband. I thought that I couldn't get in trouble, so I lied for him." She admitted to all of it. Was she being sincere? Is it a mark of sincerity for someone to come into this courtroom and admit to you their own patterns of misconduct? Good Lord, you had a drug dealer come in here and confess, basically to a long pattern of misconduct. And so the question is, if they are not being sincere, if they are not telling you the truth, what in the world are they doing in this courtroom? These are folks that came in to you and testified truly. In fact, Brie Larson, when I was trying to talk with her about some of the evidence and some of the witnesses, the same with the defense, she was shooting us down as if we were trying to get her to say something that wasn't true. Pretty dang frank. In fact, when asked about some of the specific things that were charged, she was like, "No, that's not exactly how it happened. It happened this way. This is what happened." These aren't people who are a tool for the prosecution. Every single one of them corrected both the defense and the prosecution if we tried to go out of the line or tried to go astray. Evaluate their conduct in court. Evaluate their relationship and their prejudices, their motives to lie. We'll talk about this whole immunity thing in just a minute, but keep in mind, what do any of these people have to gain by coming in and testifying falsely? Nothing. Not a dang thing, right? Because remember, if they come in and testify falsely, they can be prosecuted for perjury. If they come in and testify truthfully, they face no consequences. So, if the truth, the real truth, was Mr. Drug Dealer testifying, "I've never, ever sold Captain Larson drugs," no consequences. If the truth were that all of those drugs in the house were only Brie Larson's and Brie Larson's alone, and Captain Larson didn't have any idea that those drugs even existed, no consequences. So why didn't they testify that way? Because it's not the truth. The extent to which each witness is either supported by or contradicted by the evidence, and basically what you have here, members, is you have Captain Larson's statement to the commanders, which you should take and you should evaluate against the evidence that you have and everything else. Your verdict will send a message as to which side you end up on. And finally, how each witness might be affected by the verdict. And let's be honest, there's not a single person who testified in front of you that has anything to gain by the verdict. Not a dang person. None of them. If it's guilty, if it's not guilty, there's only one person who's being affected, and it was not anyone who came in this courtroom and testified. It is Captain Larson and Captain Larson alone. You should think about that when you're evaluating the evidence in this case. The judge says, taking on all these matters into account, you should then consider the probability of each witness's testimony and the inclination of the witness to tell the truth. And this, members, is where I want to talk about this. This is the instructions that the judge gives you on the immunity issues here, right? And members, you will have all of these instructions to read. I strongly encourage you to read through them. But basically what the judge says is you should consider the fact that this witness testified under a grant of immunity because if they tell the truth, no consequences. If they lie, they can be prosecuted for perjury. It is not immunity from prosecution. It is not a deal between the government and the witness. Hey, if you come in and testify, we won't prosecute you. In fact, you heard from all of these witnesses. Most of them didn't even want to be here. Brie Larson was subpoenaed. ordered to be here. Her mother, Lisa, ordered to be here. Drug dealer, ordered to be here. So not a single one of these people that has a lot to say about Captain Larson came in here voluntarily for some sort of sweet deal with the prosecution. No, the opposite, actually. They were told, you shall be here and you shall tell the truth. And it's only if you come in and lie can you be prosecuted. You should think about that when you're evaluating their credibility. All right, members, let's talk about the assault consummated by a battery first. When you think about Brie Larson's testimony, this is basically what she describes, that she's in the shower, Captain Larson comes into the shower, pulls her out, restrains her, and then in a fit of anger, pulls her down the stairs, throws her on the dog bed, out the door on a cold February morning with nothing on but a blanket. The judge gives you some definition, though, when asking about injuries. It doesn't need to be injuries, right? A battery, right? It doesn't require that you have a big ol' hunk and bruise on your arm. The judge tells you that it requires bodily harm, which means the offensive of touching of another person, however slight. That's all it requires. The injuries might be something else, but there are no injuries that anyone's alleging in this case. We're not saying there was a threat to life, nothing like that. This is just assault consummated by a battery, an offensive of touching, however slight. Members, you know the testimony, right? Brie Larson didn't hide from the truth. She said, yeah, I threw the whiteboard. I was mad. Yes, the flower pot, my flower pot, I threw that too. And when that didn't get his attention, I threw his phone and I went crash, 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 and then I busted it. In fact, you have the phone. You're going to be able to look at that through deliberations. This phone is busted, but the law doesn't say that when someone breaks your property in a fit of anger, you can go and then attack them and touch them, right? That's not what the law says. The law doesn't protect a right to revenge, to get mad and strike out on someone, which is basically what happened in this case. Because Brie Larson was in the shower. We know she was in the shower, not just from her testimony, remember, but the officers, when they talked to her, went back to the house and saw the floor in the bathroom all wet, right by the shower. They saw that too. So was Captain Larson trying to protect his wife in the shower? No, he got mad. He got mad, maybe because his phone was broken, maybe because his wife had a point, maybe because his wife took that whiteboard that she had previously used to write love notes to him on and threw it. Maybe that's what made him mad. But for this defense to properly apply, he needs to actually be defending some property, and his pride is not property. The second thing, he must actually have believed that the amount of force he used was required to protect his property. All right, members, let's say for a moment that there's some property, right? Some property that might be an issue. The second question you have to ask yourself, is what Captain Larson did next proportionate to the fear he felt? Certainly not. This video clip of that doorbell footage, listen to what Brie Larson says. Look at her. It is a February morning, and I understand that it might be a little warmer here in Nevada than it is in other places, but it is still a February morning, and someone doesn't go outside of their house to a neighbor's house who they've never met before, have no idea who this person is, barefoot and completely naked except for a blanket. Someone doesn't go over there by their own volition. Something happened in that house. You have the pictures of the house. You know the state of that house. Ask yourself, was that a proportionate response from Captain Larson? Because what Brie Larson says is, I'm in shock. I'm embarrassed. Can I get help, please? This video, members, is the best evidence we have of what happened in that house. So, was there an offensive touching? And was his response reasonable and proportionate? And the answer there was an offensive touching. The government has met its elements, has proven that there was, in fact, those touches that were alleged in the specifications, and that this defense right here does not apply. It does not apply. This is the condition of the house, members. This is the condition of Miss Larson right after this happened. She owned what she did during that fight in her testimony to you. She didn't try to exaggerate it. She didn't try to blame it all on him. She told you exactly what she did. And everything she says, from the officers, the testimony from the sergeant, that a strange woman was coming to his house naked but for a blanket, asking for help. The government has met its burden with respect to these three elements, and no defense applies. Let's move on. All right, so here's a question for you, members. If Brie Larson is willing to come in and testify about all of her bumps and bruises with respect to the drugs, with respect to what she did during that fight, and she hasn't lied to you yet, why would she lie to you about this? The government basically needs to prove two things. First, that the accused took her phone, smashed it, and threatened to leave her if she ever called the police again, and that under the circumstances, that conduct was unbecoming of an officer and gentleman. Brie Larson has no reason to come in here and spin stuff, because if she did, and if she was trying to, she would not have been as honest as she was with respect to everything else. She's got no reason to come in and lie to you. None at all. All right, members, this will take some time and I appreciate your patience. Let's just take a look at what we're going to go through next when it comes to the drug offenses. The government has basically accused Captain Larson for using psilocybin psychedelic mushrooms, possession of psilocybin psychedelic mushrooms, distribution of psilocybin psychedelic mushrooms, the use of ecstasy, Molly, MDMA, the distribution of ecstasy, Molly, MDMA, the possession of ecstasy, Molly, and MDMA, the use of LSD or acid, and there's a cherry on top, soliciting Captain Carter to use Molly with him. So let's talk about the analysis that was done on these particular drugs, all right? Now, these were sent, you heard in the stipulation of facts, right? This bag right here was sent to USACIL, the non-associate latent print. Basically, the fingerprint that was tested was compared to Brie Larson's and Captain Larson's, compared both. Just in case someone got the cute idea of trying to throw Brie Larson under the bus, let's test these drugs for both. Why, they found that it matches Captain Larson, not Brie, Captain Larson. Now, to be fair, we don't know when these prints were put on the bag. Brie could have handled them, right? It's all fair. It's absolutely fair. But the evidence that we have, the forensic proof that we have, is that Captain Larson handled those drugs that were hastily pushed into the engine compartment of his boat. Nothing about Brie Larson at all. This is Captain Larson's Corvette, pointing to the slide. The one that Mr. Drug Dealer testified to you about. It's a blue Corvette that he drove to meet Mr. Drug Dealer in. Mr. Drug Dealer doesn't know Captain Larson's wife's name. He doesn't really know much about her. Can really only talk about one of his friends. So it's clear they're not super close. But he does know what kind of car Captain Larson drives. That Corvette. Possession of psilocybin mushrooms. In other words, members, the mushrooms at Captain Larson's house that have his fingerprints on them are his mushrooms. And to the extent that there's any confusion about whether it's a defense to throw your wife under the bus and say all of this is her drugs, it's not. His shrooms, his house, his fingerprints, his drug dealer, his friends. My final topic for you, members, is the integrity of offense, conduct unbecoming, and a false official statement. Before we get there, I just want to talk about the timeline of each of the other things. Remember, on the 24th of February, Captain Larson and Miss Larson got in a fight, okay? When Brie Larson goes back into the home and brings that bag of shroom tea down to the officers, Captain Larson wasn't in the house, right? A no contact order put in place. She leaves the state. Captain Larson doesn't. At this point, know that there's drugs in this case. He thinks it's just a domestic violence incident. That's all he has to worry about. It's only when Brie Larson gets back over a week later that she realizes that this got real big, real fast. So, what's going on in March? Brie Larson's back. The fight fades in the memory. They try to reconcile. It was a whirlwind romance, but they have, at least it appears, a decent amount in common. They try to repair their relationship. And so, as you heard this from Miss Larson, she starts hearing from Captain Larson and others, Hey, you're a civilian. The military can't prosecute you. You can repair your relationship. You're not going to ruin your husband's career. Everything's going to be okay. Just say the drugs are yours. Just say the drugs are yours and this will all go away. And so she does. At Captain Larson's request, she does. On the 26th of March. These Snapchats, though, that Captain Larson thought would disappear, right? Because that's how he communicated with his drug dealer, and that's why they talk on Snapchat. It's because evidence disappears. Unfortunately, for Captain Larson, DCFL managed to snag a few of these Snapchats. So we know that Captain Larson has been monitoring the investigation. He's been talking with Bree about the investigation. In fact, as of the 12th of April, he's saying to his friend, Bree said she gave them your number. That's how they know that you even exist. So Captain Larson and Bree already talked about the investigation at that point. They know the investigation is going on. Bree had shared with Captain Larson everything she told the cops. Captain Larson is tracking, right? And so on the 26th of March, he tells her to write this letter, make it all go away. But that didn't make it go away, right? In fact, you can read it in those text messages with his friend that Captain Larson starts to get increasingly concerned. On the 11th of April, his friend says, "Hey man, I just got this voicemail from Air Force people, right?" And Captain Larson, innocent Captain Larson, doesn't say, "Really? What are they contacting you about? I didn't think you knew anyone in the Air Force." No, innocent Captain Larson says, "Don't answer. Don't answer. I need to call you tonight. When will you be free? FYI, they can't do anything to you. Don't be scared. They may threaten you, but it's all garbage." The investigation didn't stop on the 26th of March. It didn't stop. It kept going. It kept going. Captain Larson knew it. He was talking with the witnesses about it. He was talking with his wife about it. In fact, on the 17th of April, he, after not hearing from his friend for a number of days, checks in. "Hey, did OSI contact you again? Just wondering if you heard anything from those investigators that are investigating the thing that I'm totally innocent of." And then he says, "Please be careful with what you say. You can't say anything about buying, possessing, or using." No, because my wife has already for me, and that it was all hers, but they didn't make the investigation go away. They may lie to you to get you to confess to something. Just hold strong. My lawyer's done all my communications to them, and they know nothing of your name from me. It's all Bree. And remember, they have no authority to punish you for anything you say. In other words, the investigation is still going on, friend. I need you to cover for me. I need you to lie for me. But that didn't work either. So Captain Larson tells Bree Larson again, "You've got to ramp it up this time. You need to talk to the investigators. You need to talk to the command. You need to fix this because I am in hot water at this point." In fact, he goes a step further. He says, "I'm going to kill myself." Threatened suicide to his wife if this comes back to bite him. Threatens suicide. So Bree does. She talks about all sorts of stuff in that letter. All sorts of blacking out from anxiety, saying things she doesn't mean, ramping up the pressure, saying whatever she needs to say to fix her marriage, and at her husband's request to make this go away. But yet, it does not. And so, you heard that in late April, Captain Larson tries one last gamut. He goes into the commander's office himself and tells what can only be described as a brazen lie. And if you don't believe, members, that's when Captain Larson said that he'd never seen drugs, possessed drugs, or even been at a drug deal. If you believe that's the truth, then I apologize for wasting your time and this entire week. That statement to the commander was a last-ditch effort when the wife and the friends and all of that didn't work. Captain Larson went in and put his reputation on the line and lied to his commander's face. So, as we're going through all of these acts that are charged under either Article 133, consider whether an officer, whether a gentleman would do these things. The judge tells you that actions or behavior dishonoring or disgracing the person as an officer, seriously compromising that officer's character, or seriously compromising that person's standing as an officer, believe that that sort of activity meets that definition. and the examples that the judge gives you of dishonesty, of injustice, of lawlessness, then the government has met its first terminal element with respect to each of those elements. All of these constitute conduct unbecoming of a captain in the United States Air Force. The final act is this: that such a statement was false, that he knew at the time that he made it that it was false, and that the false statement was made with the intent to deceive his commander one last time. There's one issue, members, and I want to draw your attention to this briefly. For the Article 107 charge, it's charged as on or about the 2nd of May. If that date appears to be incorrect, it's no big deal. It doesn't affect the legality of the charge. But to the extent that there's any question about the substance of whether Captain Larson was telling the truth, just consider this is Captain Larson's phone number, and Mr. Drug Dealer is in his phone. This is the drug dealer's phone. There's Captain America, Captain Larson's phone number in Mr. Drug Dealer's phone. There's the extent of their texting, because for the most part they communicated by Snap, because the evidence they thought would disappear, and you don't communicate with a drug dealer by what you mean or by what you believe to be a clandestine medium if you have no idea what's going on. In fact, Captain Larson even confessed to you, right? Trying to mix in a little bit of truth because he knew about the investigation at this point. He was tracking what was going on. Bree had given them the names of all the people involved, so he knew the OSI knew about Mr. Drug Dealer, right? So he said, I know him. I know he's a drug dealer. That's all true. But I've never bought, I've never used, I've never sold, I've never purchased. I don't know anything about drugs. All I know is when my friends come into town, I know that he has safe drugs. I'm a father figure to these people, so I want to hook them up with a guy who has safe drugs. What? So the drug dealer that you don't know very well, you know him well enough to know that he has safe drugs so you can farm him out to your friends, but you've never used, you've never distributed, you've never possessed, you've never seen, you've never been there? No. That statement, members, was a lie. It's your duty to call it as such, which begs the question, if that was a lie, what is Captain Larson lying about and why? An innocent person does not normally feel the need to invent a fabricated story about his innocence. Members, you have a lot to look through, a lot to think about. It's a lot of misconduct over a long period of time. Violence, drugs, deceit. Drug deals don't happen in front of nuns. Evaluate the witnesses, evaluate the evidence, evaluate whether the statement to his commander was true. All of the evidence points to Captain Larson's guilt. And after evaluation of this evidence in this case, you will find that the government has met its burden, and you must return a verdict of guilty as to all these charges and specifications.